to the Kuskokwim Consortium Library. Today we are going to make a cooking video.
Yay!
My name's Theresa.
I'm Mikayla.
And we work here at the library in Bethel, Alaska. So today we're going to be cooking a few recipes from this awesome new cookbook, Borderlands, recipes from the Rio Grande to the Pacific. We're really excited to try some of these recipes. Something I really like about this cookbook, I've been using this guy's recipes for a lot of years, and most of his recipes feature wild meats, wild vegetables, wild greens, wild foods. And he talks a lot in the recipes about how to kind of adapt them based on what you have on hand to cook. So today we're going to make two things that I just think sound super interesting. We're going to make a green chili apple pie.
Weird.
It sounds very strange, but I love apple pie, so I'm really excited to try it.
I don't love apple pie, but I'm also interested to try it. To see how much the chilies take effect. Maybe I'll like this more than I like actual apple pie.
When in the recipe, he talks about how he likes to eat it with a slice of cheddar cheese, which is how I grew up eating apple pie, and it's really, really, really good. Midwestern roots right here.
Yep.
And so I'm excited to try that. The other thing we're gonna make is we're gonna make pork with wild greens. However,
Yum.
anybody that has ever cooked with me knows that number one, I cannot follow a recipe. I like using what I have on hand, and especially being in rural Alaska, we cannot always get the ingredients that we need. So we will be loosely following the recipe, but hopefully following the spirit of the recipe.
Yeah, the spirit.
So we don't have pork, so we're going to use this moose heart. The reason that I selected moose heart as the wild game of choice for this recipe is because I had it in my freezer, and I've been looking for a reason to cook it. And also, moose heart is really rich, and so I thought it might be a good substitute for pork. We'll see. We'll see how it turns out. Moose heart is really tasty, so it'll be a good stew no matter what.
Adventurous cooking with Theresa Quiner.
Yeah, it'll be good. The other thing is I forgot to thaw the meat ahead of time, and so it's still pretty frozen, so we're going to end up using the Instant Pot from our Library of Things to cook this. So we won't be cooking it on the stove top like the recipe says to. We're going to be cooking it in the Instant Pot, but pressure cooking meat leads to very tender meat, which is the result that we are hoping for with this recipe. So we'll see how it turns out. Hopefully it turns out good. I think it probably will.
I'm excited. I'm excited.
The ingredients are all good, so it can't go too bad. The other thing that we're going to be doing for the apple pie recipe is we're going to be learning how to roast some green chilies for the recipe. So we'll talk through that process too. Let's get started.
Woo!
Okay, so first we washed our hands. We're going to walk you guys through this step by step, assuming that you don't know anything about cooking. So if you're a really experienced cook, I'm sorry, it might be annoying. Okay, so one of the things we're going to need for the apple pie is we're going to need to blacken some of the green chilies. Now we're just using what we have available here in Bethel. The recipe for the apple pie says not to use anything super spicy. These are hatch chilies, and they're not super spicy. Hopefully they turn out okay. We had kind of a limited selection to work with at the grocery store here. So at the beginning of the book, he talks through some of the things to just kind of keep on hand for this kind of cooking, and keeping roasted chilies in stock is just a helpful thing to have for a lot of these recipes. He recommends a few different methods, none of which we can do with what we have to work with in the kitchen. That would be cooking them over like an open fire, or using the gas burner on your stove, which I have at home, or like cooking them on your grill or something like that. Because we don't have that, we're going to have to actually just roast them in the oven. So we're going to go ahead and get these roasting first, and then we're going to move on to getting the stew ready. So all we're going to do now is just wash these, and then we're going to put them on a pan, and we're going to stick them in the oven at 425 degrees, and we're going to cook them until they're blackened on the outside. So we just popped these in a pan, and now we're going to stick them in the oven. Again, this is better to do it at home on your grill or over your propane burner. I preheated the oven to 425 degrees, which is just the temperature that I usually use when I'm roasting vegetables at home. So we're going to try that out and see how it works.
Great.
So next we're going to move on to getting the moose heart stew going. We are, like I said, using what we have on hand for this recipe. And I think a lot of the wild greens that people harvest in Alaska are earlier in the spring. And so we're actually just going to use some kale that I picked from my garden this morning. But the recipe recommends a lot of substitutions. You can use spinach, you can use, different wild greens. There's one in here that I've never heard of. He says purslane is a wild green that he uses for this stew. But again, like this is a pretty versatile recipe, it looks like. So you could really use anything from some sort of venison like moose to, birds, chicken, quail, lots of different things. So again, we're gonna use moose heart. I did not practice this recipe ahead of time, so I'm going to read the recipe, and you guys are going to follow along with me and Mikayla.
Sure.
So first we're going to cut the pork shoulder into large hunks. Well, we have a solid frozen piece of meat, so we're not going to do that. We're going to cut it into hunks when it's cooked.
Cool.
It says to cover the pork shoulder with water in a large lidded pot like a Dutch oven. Again, we're using the Instant Pot because it's what we have, and we have a frozen piece of meat. I was given an Instant Pot several years ago by my brothers for Christmas, and it sat on a shelf in my house for about 6 months before I finally used it because I was very intimidated by this extremely useful cooking appliance. So there's a lot of different settings on this, and basically it's just a pressure cooker made easy with buttons to time for specific timings for different things. For example, there's a bean function if you're cooking dry beans. We're going to use the setting that says
Meat
soup, meat stew. And then we're probably going to add about 10 minutes of cooking time because we're using frozen meat, and then we'll check on it, and if the meat is still tough, we'll just cook it longer. If you take the lid off, there's a little rack in here which you can use. This recipe does call for braising the meat. However, because we're cooking the meat in here, I'm going to go ahead and put this rack in here because I don't want the meat to burn. The heat comes from the bottom of the Instant Pot, and sometimes it does, a burn error message comes on and it doesn't work properly when that's going. So I want the meat lifted off the bottom of the pan. So then we're just going to take the meat, we're going to stick it in there. Next we're just going to cover the meat with water, put in some salt, some bay leaves, some Mexican oregano. I purchased some of these ingredients because I just like to keep them on hand in my house when I was out of town and I went to an actual Mexican grocery store. However, personally, if I didn't have Mexican oregano, I would just use regular oregano at home. Not a big deal. And we're going to do half an onion chopped coarsely, 4 cloves of garlic, and 1 sprig of epazote and 2 avocado leaves. Now, we do not have epazote or avocado leaves, so we're just going to leave that out. We're not cooking experts by any means, but, oh, you do it different than me.
This is how I always start an onion.
Oh, I'm going to learn something. I just hack at it.
And then be careful of fingers. There's my rough chop.
Okay, toss it in the pot.
They're not, the reason it's rough is because these are not even pieces. If you want even pieces to cook evenly, then you're gonna need to cut evenly.
So then we're gonna do some bay leaves as well. You wanna chop the garlic too, Mikayla?
Yep.
4 cloves. Again, this is a stew, so I don't think it needs to be perfect by any means. It's
How do you
gonna
do
kind of dissolve.
Is it this way?
I can show you how I do it.
Yeah.
I usually, peeling garlic, especially if it's really like oily, sticky garlic, which is good, it means it's flavorful, can be kind of hard to peel. People have different tricks. I always add extra garlic to everything I cook, so I'm going to actually do 6 cloves of garlic.
Woo! Love garlic.
Yeah, I mean, it's a soup. You can't go wrong. What I was taught to do by my mom is I take the garlic and I smash it.
Oh.
Because we're chopping it anyway.
Yeah.
So then you have that kind of like that.
Whoa.
I know, it works really good. And then you just kind of roughly chop it. So then we're going to put in 3 bay leaves. Again, I got these bay leaves at the Mexican grocery store, but I don't know if there's anything different about them or not than regular bay leaves, but bay leaves are just good to add to stews and soups and stuff. My timer's going off, so I'm going to go peek at those chilies that are in the oven. So we had those in there for 10 minutes. They're starting to get a little blackened, but I think we want more of a char on the outside, so I'm going to go ahead and pop those back in for 10 more minutes. and just see what they look like in another 10 minutes.
They smell. Does this just go straight into the pot, Theresa?
It does. Toss it in. So next we're gonna do a tablespoon of Mexican oregano, which I have right here.
Sorry.
So a tablespoon or a teaspoon? Tablespoon.
That's why it's important to make sure everyone knows what you're doing in the kitchen. Tablespoon or teaspoon?
Tablespoon. You know what, Mikayla? I don't measure. I'm just gonna this is how I cook when I'm at home, so that's what I'm gonna do today. I'm like, that looks like about a tablespoon.
You can measure, and it will be fine. But if you want to save yourself a dish, also.
That's usually where I'm coming from. Yeah.
I get it. I get it.
I mean, I love reading cookbooks and I love reading recipes and I love to cook. And I like to use them as inspiration and I learn from them. But I personally think that the food usually turns out fine if you don't measure. But that's why I don't bake. And that's also why we're going to be using a pre-made pie crust for the pie today.
Sorry, I do measure. And I care about preciseness, I guess. But a lot of times the reason is because I do bake. And because baking is chemistry and science.
Yeah. So it looks like now we just need to put some salt into the pot. So I think it's important to have a lot of salt in the stew. It doesn't say how much salt to put in. So I'm just gonna do like maybe about a tablespoon because I want that meat to be really well flavored. So when you put the lid on, this is something that I thought was a little confusing when I got my Instant Pot and I had to watch some YouTube videos to sort of figure this piece of it out. If you look at it, there's this little knob up here that's loose. It's supposed to be loose. And you want to turn it all the way back. There's a little red pressure thing here that when the Instant Pot is at full pressure, it will pop up and lock it into place so that you don't accidentally open the Instant Pot while it's at full pressure. This thing will not explode on you. I think a lot of people are intimidated by pressure cooking because they think it's going to explode. I don't know what kind of pressure cookers people used to use, but I've used a lot of different kinds and canned a lot of food and I've never had one explode on me. And I'm going to hit the meat stew button. So that's cooking it at 20 minutes. I think we should probably do more like 40 minutes because we have frozen meat. So, actually, I'm going to do 30 minutes, actually. Now we're just going to let that cook, and we're going to move on to making the salsa that we'll use for this recipe and also getting the apple pie cooking. I think the pie is going to take longer than making the salsa, so let's get started on that first. So again, this recipe calls for making your own crust. Have you made your own pie crust before?
Not successfully.
I have also unsuccessfully made pie crust. Again, it's precise, and maybe another day we will film a cooking video learning how to make pie crust. So we're gonna use 3 pounds of cooking apples. I feel like I like tart desserts, and so I got these green apples. I think they're called Granny Smith. And it says that we need to peel, core, and chop the apples into 1/2-inch chunks or thin slices. So we might want to wash these first.
If you want your apples not to brown while you are waiting, you can put lime juice on them.
Okay, the timer's going off, so I'm going to go check on what is in the oven. Okay, these have been in the oven for 20 minutes. They're looking pretty blackened. I'm going to look at the recipe again and see what it says, like what the desired result is, but I think these are probably where we need them to be. So now we're supposed to cover them, and he says to use a large bowl with a plate or lid on top. And we want them to steam now for about 15 to 20 minutes. There's lemon juice in the fridge, 100% fresh lemon. Lemons are expensive in rural Alaska.
I'm 100% fresh lemon.
2 tablespoons of freshly squeezed lemon juice. I will go ahead and measure for the sake of Mikayla.
Thank you.
2 tablespoons, okay.
Yeah.
There we go, I measured. We thought this out really well, and because we don't want to accidentally feed somebody nuts who's allergic, we're going to leave the nuts out of this recipe. It was intentional. Okay, so we're going to skip the nuts, but this recipe calls for pine nuts or chopped pecans, which I was kind of curious about, so I'm going to have to make this pie again, which I'm sure I'll want to anyway. We're going to do 1/2 cup of sugar. That's a fourth of a cup, so we're going to do 2 of those. We're going to do 3 tablespoons of flour. This step, because let me tell you, I spent all afternoon picking wild blueberries recently. Went home and made a pie. Didn't read the recipe very carefully and was kind of barely following the recipe. And I forgot to put the flour in, and I had a soupy pie. It still tasted good, but after spending the whole day picking berries, I should have probably read the recipe. A teaspoon of ground cinnamon. And we're gonna do half a teaspoon of ground allspice. And then we need a fourth of a teaspoon of ground nutmeg. And a teaspoon of vanilla extract.
This is what we're looking like, in case anyone's wondering. The sugar kind of macerates any fruit. So if you see it, like, it's getting more liquidy than even the liquid we had in it because of the sugar.
So after we do this, we're just gonna get started on making the salsa for the stew. Something that's really interesting about this salsa recipe is that it has lard in it. I've noticed that there's a lot of lard in a lot of these recipes, which isn't something I have cooked with a ton in the past, but I did happen to have some in my house because it calls for 3 tablespoons of lard or vegetable oil, which is pretty much exactly how much I had left in this package, so we're probably not going to measure. I'm just going to kind of finish it off. So this recipe calls for 4 plum tomatoes, which we've got right here, 1 white onion quartered. It doesn't have to, none of this has to be perfect because we're going to end up blending this, so the pieces don't really matter so much. 4 unpeeled cloves of garlic. And then it says it lists some different kinds of chile. Guajillo, ancho, chiles morritas, or chipotles and adobo. We're gonna kind of just have to use what we have because again, we don't have a Mexican grocery store here. And the recipe does say, so this is a red salsa, but you could easily use a green tomatillo based salsa instead. And we're gonna add the salsa at the end. So I think, how spicy do you want this to be, Mikayla?
I like spicy. Spicy doesn't like me, but I like spicy.
Yeah, I think we're gonna go for like kind of a medium spicy maybe. I might not put the habaneros in just because we are gonna be taking this food to a going away party for a coworker later. Now, okay, we don't have a pie pan. And so we were thinking that we'd use this cast iron skillet, but this pie crust is not quite the right size for that pan. I'm wondering if we should roll it out a little bit.
I can.
To thin it out. We're not professional chefs.
We could be. This is our start.
A fourth of a pound of tomatillos. How many do you think that would be, Mikayla?
Fourth of a pound?
Like maybe 3 of these?
I could do it in cups. I don't think I could do it in pounds.
Doesn't say how many pounds the package is. I'm gonna say 3. Okay, so it says 2. Halve the tomatoes. We're not gonna cut the tomatillos. And then for the garlic, we are not going to peel it, actually. 4 to 5 guajillo, ancho, adobo. So we do have... It says we're chipotles and adobo, so I might just use some of these chipotles. Because I have them in my house and I haven't been using them. So we're gonna need to rehydrate these.
Do you want a bowl?
Yeah, and I have boiling water ready to go on the stove. I'm just gonna look at the recipe for how to rehydrate them because we have a cookbook, so we should use it. So it says he says to stem and seed them before rehydrating. I have never done that before. Surprisingly, we could find some of these. We were able to get guajillo. It says 2 to 5, so let's just use the whole package because we've got 4 here. These should DC pretty easy, actually. So the recipe says to get a como griddle or cast iron hot, and then we're going to sear the cut side of the tomatoes, the garlic, and the onion until well blackened. And while that's happening, we're going to rehydrate all of the chile. So, and then we're also going to do some, we did the ancho, which we don't have, so we're going to use these, pasillo. I don't know how spicy these are, so maybe we won't add the habanero. So I'm going to cook these until well blackened. So yeah, there we go.
Thank you, ma'am. All right. So it says you need to pull the skins off. When they're all skinned, use a knife to remove the tops of the chilies and the stem and the seed ball with it. Use a butter knife to scrape out the seeds. Don't be fastidious. That's another good word. Seeds are not, oh, it says be fastidious, where the seeds are not digestible. Repeat this with all the chilies and you're good. Okay.
I'm gonna pour some boiling water over these dry chile.
Ah.
So while we were doing all of the other cooking, the Instant Pot actually is done now. So we're gonna check on the meat and see how it's doing. So you have to be kind of careful with this part. I'm gonna move these tomatillos out of the way and stick them over here. So to depressurize it, you can just let it happen naturally, but I want to check on the meat and so that if we have to cook it longer, we can. So I'm just going to take this nozzle here and turn it, and all the pressure is going to start releasing.
Because this means now that our green chilies are done, I'm going to slice them up and put them in our pie mixture. Okay. Combining. We are gonna add the filling to the pie crust. It says in the recipe to mound it in the middle because we're gonna place another pie crust on top. When they say that, they don't mean like this, just to be clear. You wanna even it out a little bit, but then add more to the center so you have room to work with on the edge. Have you seen like a cartoon pie? Think like that.
In the world's tiniest blender, we're going to start blending that. We're going to add the tomatillos. Where did those go?
I need space to do pie crust.
So we're adding the, should be on camera, I guess. Since that's what we're doing. This is a very, very vintage.
So I folded the edges over. Now would be a good time to do an egg wash. I don't think we got the stuff to do the egg wash.
The recipe does call for an egg wash. We might have an egg in the fridge. We might have one egg.
But you can also sugar your crust, but it does say to vent. Here, I'll do a little tease for Theresa. So the pie is ready to go in the oven. So we are gonna bake this at 375 for 20 minutes, and then put it down to bake at 350 until it is brown on top.
So we're definitely doing the salsa in batches because we have a tiny blender. So I'm going to dump this into a bowl. The recipe says you can put it through a mesh strainer if you want it without like seeds and stuff, but I personally don't care about seeds being in there. So we're gonna blend up the rest of this and see how those, see we got a nice char on there. I'm gonna go ahead and add the lard, which I think is very strange, but we'll see how it turns out. It'll add a little fat to the stew. The salsa is going to actually go in the stew, and so with such a lean, we're going to add lard to the salsa, which I think is interesting, and I would not normally do that, but the recipe calls for it. And using a mousse heart, that mousse heart is so lean that the fat in the salsa might actually add something really nice to the broth. I'll be curious to see how it turns out. It says 3 tablespoons. I might actually measure. What we were supposed to do is blend everything and then pour it into a hot pan with the lard. I cannot follow a recipe. So I think that what we'll do is pour this into a hot pan and just cook it down a little bit. That'll cook the tomato a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's just to incorporate the lard, so.
Chaos cooking with Theresa.
This is why probably following the recipe would make sense sometimes when you're trying a completely new recipe that you've never made before.
Yeah, maybe.
From a culture that's not your own. So now we're going to cook this down a little because we were supposed to heat up the lard, pour the salsa in to incorporate it, and I didn't follow the steps, so we're going to hope it turns out good.
Heat the lard and saucepan, pour salsa in. It will spit and sputter. stir this constantly until lard is incorporated, then turn the heat to low. So I'd start with a medium heat.
Medium? Yeah.
So until the lard is incorporated. When it is incorporated, turn heat to low and cover the pot.
With all the chaos of what was happening, we accidentally hit a button and started the Instant Pot over again, and the pressure thing was open, so it's been cooking longer than we intended it to, but since we have frozen meat, hopefully we just end up with really, really, really tender meat. Just gonna set these aside and use this for the meat.
Hey, the thing went down. Can I open this?
Yes. And you can put the meat on the cutting board there.
Ooh.
Okay, the meat is hopefully done. We're gonna pull it out. Yep, put the greens in. We're gonna simmer it for like 20 minutes. And we have everything in the pot now. We have the moose heart, we have the broth, we have added the greens. We are going to simmer this for 10 to 20 minutes, and we're gonna add the salsa now. We're just gonna pour all of that in. Look how pretty and red it is. Remember, the recipe says that you can use a green salsa too. This is very different in consistency from the salsa I usually make, but I'm sure it's gonna be delicious. Okay, so our stew is done, and we're gonna go ahead and give it a try. It's a really, really pretty deep red. I'm gonna go ahead and put this in a bowl. We've got our kale.
Sorry. Don't mind me. We used all of our spoons. I'm just trying to get...
So the recipe says to eat it with crema, which is like sour cream. We don't have that, so we're just gonna give it a try. It's really hot. Cheers. That's really interesting. I like the Mexican oregano in there. I think I could almost use a pop of acid. I might put a little bit of that lemon juice in here. What do you think?
Eat more moose heart.
It would definitely be probably a richer broth with pork. See, to me, that's not spicy.
It's a little spicy. I have a sensitive tongue.
I think I've burnt off all my taste buds. However, I like the heart in there. It's really good. I think probably if I were to cook it again, I might add a little bit more lard just because if I was using moose, just because it is so lean. But I think the flavor is really good. I think I am going to pop a little bit of that lemon juice in there.
I think what I would do, because I'm more of a Midwestern palate, I know you are too, but you have burnt taste buds. I think I would put like heavy whipping cream in there to make it a little bit more creamy, actually.
Well, the recipe calls for the sour cream. We should get some sour cream and try it again later.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's delicious though.
Yeah.
Also, like a cool method for making soup. Like.
All right. Hi. Okay. So I'm gonna pull the pie out of the oven, friends. It needs to cool, so we probably won't be trying it today, but we will give you our review at a later date. But I wanted to show you what it looks like. Smells really good. There is the hint of like something not appley in there, you know?
It smells really good. I'm so excited.
Yeah, but we probably won't eat it on camera, but we will give you a review later. Yum.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks.